President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, are we presently in a quorum call?
Yes, we are.
May I ask that the quorum call be lifted?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak about a subject that I know is dear to the presiding officer's heart, and that is the sorry state of our campaign finance system and the need for the Disclose Act of 2012, we call Disclose 2.0. The Supreme Court's 2010 decision in Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission opened the floodgates to unlimited corporate and special interest money in our elections, bringing about an era in which corporations and other wealthy interests can drown out the voices of individual voters in our political system. Worse still, much of this spending is anonymous, so we don't even know who is spending millions to influence our elections. Here's how my home state newspaper, the Providence Journal, explained it when the ruling came down. They said the ruling will mean that more than ever, big spending economic interests will determine who gets elected. More money will especially pour into relentless attack campaigns. Free speech for most individuals will suffer because their voices will count for even less than they do now. They will simply be drowned out by the big money. The Providence Journal had a lot of foresight with that warning. What has happened since then has proven them right. Senator John McCain recently said, "I predicted when the United States Supreme Court, with their absolute ignorance of what happens in politics, struck down," he was referring to the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law, "that there would be a flood of money into campaigns not transparent, unaccounted for, and this is exactly what is happening." Senator McCain, is it ever? In the 2010 midterm elections, the first after Citizens United, there was more than a four-fold increase in expenditures from super PACs and other outside groups compared to 2006, with nearly three-quarters of political advertising coming from sources that were prohibited from spending money in 2006. Also, in 2010, 501c4 and C6 not-for-profit organizations spent more than $135 million in unlimited and secret contributions. This anonymous secret spending rose from 1% of outside spending in 2006 to 44% in 2010. We are already seeing the influence of money on the 2012 elections. Super PACs and other outside groups have spent around $140 million in this election cycle. That's about twice what was spent over the same period in 2008 during the last presidential election. In the 2 weeks leading up to Super Tuesday, outside PACs that supported the Republican presidential candidate spent 3 times as much on advertising as the campaigns did themselves. There are already signs that things are going to get even worse. As reported by the Washington Post, groups that do not reveal their funding sources have spent $28.5 million on advertising related to the November presidential matchup, or about 90% of the total. 90%. And these groups that don't reveal their funding sources. Our campaign finance system is broken. Action is required to fix it. Americans of all political stripes are disgusted by the influence of unlimited anonymous corporate cash in our elections, and disgusted by campaigns that succeed or fail depending on how many billionaires the candidates have in their pockets. More and more, people feel that their government responds only to wealthy and corporate interests as they see their jobs disappear and their wages stagnate and bailouts and special deals for the big guys, they lose ever more faith that their elected officials are actually listening to them. And over the deafening roar of secret special interest spending, they get harder and harder to listen to. This growing consensus across the political spectrum was reflected in the brief that Senator John McCain and I filed with the Supreme Court last week in American Tradition Partnership versus Bullock. In that brief, we urged the Court to reconsider the flawed central premise of its decision in Citizens United, the proposition that independent expenditures do not lead to corruption or the appearance of corruption. As the statistics about anonymous spending and public perception that I've cited make clear, this premise is discredited. I'm proud to have worked on the brief with Senator McCain, who has long been a leader in Congress on campaign finance issues, and I hope that our partnership will mark the beginning of greater cooperation across party lines on this issue of vital importance to the integrity of our great American democracy. I also hope that the Supreme Court will take heed of the nearly universal opinion that the system that they've unleashed in Citizens United puts our very democracy in jeopardy. Until the Court acts, or until we enact a constitutional amendment to repair what they have done, we are left with one weapon in the fight against the overwhelming tidal wave of money from special interests, and that is disclosure. At least make them fess up to who they are. That's why I stand here today in support of the Disclose Act of 2012. As I said, Disclose 2.0 in recognition of Senator Schumer's great work with the first Disclose Act. This legislation will shine a bright light on these powerful interests and their spending. With this legislation, which now has 43 co-sponsors in the Senate, every citizen will know who is spending these great sums of money to get their candidates elected and to influence those candidates. Particular thanks to the previous presiding officer when I began, Senator Franken, the current presiding officer, Senator Tom Udall, as well as Senators Chuck Schumer, Michael Bennet, Jeff Merkley, and Jeanne Shaheen for their hard work on developing this legislation. Senator Schumer, as we all know, has been leading the charge for disclosure since Citizens United upended and fouled our campaign finance system. In 2010, with Senator Schumer's leadership, we came within one vote of passing the original Disclose Act. And since then, the problem of anonymous, unaccountable special interest money has become much, much worse. We must redouble our efforts and pass Disclose 2.0. Disclose 2.0 says two very simple things. First, if you're an organization such as a corporation, a super PAC, a 501c4, and you're spending money in an election campaign in support of or in opposition to a candidate, you have to tell the public where that money came from and what you are spending it on in a timely manner. That should not be a controversial idea to anyone, at least to anyone who's not seeking secret special influence. This chart shows how easy it is under our current system for wealthy interests to anonymously spend millions on election ads. This amounts to a form of legalized money laundering or identity laundering. Super PACs are supposed to disclose their donors under current law, but if you want to avoid that disclosure, you can just set up a shell corporation, which may be nothing more than a P.O. box, and send the money to the super PAC through that. Or, worse still, instead of using a shell corporation, you can pass the money through to a 501c4 so-called social welfare organization, set up just for that purpose of spending money in elections. Think about that. The IRS gives nonprofit status to groups whose primary purpose in many cases is to shield billionaires and corporations spending money in elections from having their identities disclosed. In many cases, these 501c4 groups are so closely affiliated with their super PACs that they have all the same staff, all the same office space, and the C4 groups still don't have to disclose the identities of their donors. On this chart, we see the money raised through the end of 2011 by two political groups started after Citizens United by Republican political operatives. These two organizations have the same staff and the same office space, and they run negative ads against many of the same candidates. One, American Crossroads, is a super PAC and is supposed to disclose its donors. The other, Crossroads GPS, is a 501c4 group and doesn't have to disclose donors. Guess which one has raised more money? Of course, it's the 501c4 group, which doesn't have to disclose its donors. That group has raised $76.8 million as compared to only $46.4 million by its sister super PAC. This is no unique situation. For corporations trying to buy influence through spending in elections, quote, non-disclosure is always preferred, close quote, as an unnamed corporate lobbyist recently told Politico. Why? Well, for one thing, there's no accountability, not to the company shareholders, not to their customers, and not to the public. Non-disclosure is, quote, preferred because it makes it impossible for the public and for law enforcement to track the corrupting influence of the money that these corporations spend in elections. Disclose 2.0 would put an end to using 501c4 groups and shell corporations to shield the identities of big campaign contributors. One thing that shouldn't be lost in this discussion of anonymous spending is the fact that there is one person to whom this spending is virtually certainly not anonymous, and that's the candidate. That's the elected official. The donors manage to hide their identities from the public, but they can sure tell the candidate how much money they put in to that candidate's super PAC and what positions they want the candidate to take on issues. What this creates is a perfect formula for corruption. Wealthy corporations and individuals spending millions of dollars to influence a candidate without any oversight or public accountability or scrutiny. Also, as a former Attorney General, I know that the presiding officer can appreciate this as well. A well-heeled donor doesn't have to make the contribution necessarily, doesn't have to launch the ad necessarily. They can also secretly threaten a massive expenditure against a candidate if the candidate doesn't vote right on their issue. Political scientist Norm Ornstein recently said, quote, I've had this tale told to me by a number of lawmakers. You're sitting in your office and a lobbyist comes in and says, I'm working with Americans for a better America, and I can't tell you who's funding them, but I can tell you they really, really want this amendment in this bill. And who knows what they'll do? They've got more money than God. If the candidate complies and does the right thing by the amendment or the right thing by the bill, the expenditure is never made. There will be no paper trail, no trace that that threat that drove a vote, that corrupted that vote, was ever made. The whole rationale for unlimited spending was that it was going to be done independently of the candidate's campaign. That has proven false. The reality is that super PACs are anything but independent. Campaigns and super PACs share fundraising lists, donors, former staff, consultants. Candidates appear at fundraisers for their super PACs, and super PACs recycle ads originally run by the candidates. They are free to act as the, quote, evil twins of candidate campaigns, as one FEC commissioner put it, raising unlimited anonymous money and then spending it on massive amounts of advertising, most of it negative, which further hides the identity of the interest behind the ad, because if all you're doing is trashing a candidate, you don't have to even show what your interest is, let alone what your identity is. About 70% of ads in this election cycle have, as a result, been negative ads, up from only 9% in 2008. This brings us to the second thing that Disclose 2.0 does. If you're a top executive or a major donor of an organization spending millions of dollars on campaign ads, you have to take responsibility for your ad, just the way we do as candidates. These are reasonable provisions that should have wide support from Democrats and Republicans alike. As Trevor Potter, a Republican former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, said in a statement submitted to the Rules Committee of the Senate, Disclose 2.0 is, quote, appropriately targeted, narrowly tailored, clearly constitutional, and desperately needed. We have made every effort to craft an effective and fair proposal while imposing the least possible burden on covered organizations. Passing this law would remove a dark cloud of unlimited anonymous money from our elections. And it would prove to the American people that Congress is capable of fairness, equality, and following the fundamental principle of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I urge my colleagues to support the Disclose Act of 2012, and I yield the floor. I will suggest the absence of a quorum so that I may switch with the presiding officer,
The clerk
you may then take the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Acosta.
Mr. President,
The Senator from New Mexico.
asked to vitiate the quorum.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I was just listening to Senator Whitehouse, who's now in the chair, and I just want to congratulate him on filing that amicus brief with Senator McCain in the Supreme Court. I really believe that the Supreme Court should heed the good advice that both Senator McCain and Senator Whitehouse have given them. And I think if they do not heed that advice, they will be the authority that they have undertaken themselves will be taken away from them by the people that are urging a constitutional amendment to give this back to the Congress and back to the state legislatures. And I join my colleagues today to highlight what I consider a significant problem in our country, the unprecedented flow of money into our democratic elections. Over the past several months, a group of us have been working together to address this problem. We have asked the FEC, the IRS, and the FCC to take actions that would help curb the impact of money on our elections. Led by Senator Whitehouse, we have introduced the Disclose Act. This bill would shine a light into the dark corners of the campaign finance system. And Senator Bennett and I have introduced a constitutional amendment, which currently has 22 co-sponsors, to overturn the disastrous judicial opinions that have led to the broken system we have today. In January 2010, the Supreme Court issued its opinion in Citizens United versus FEC. 2 months later, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals decided the Speech Now versus FEC case. These two cases gave rise to the super PACs. Millions of dollars now pour into negative and misleading campaign ads, and often without disclosing the true source of the donations. But our campaign finance system was hardly a model of democracy before these disastrous opinions. The Citizens United and Speech Now decisions renewed our concerns about campaign finance. But the court laid the groundwork many years ago. We can go all the way back to 1976. That year, the court held in Buckley versus Vallejo that restricting independent campaign expenditures violates the First Amendment right to free speech. In effect, that money and speech are the same thing. The damage is clear. Elections become more about the quantity of the cash and less about the quality of ideas, more about the special interests and less about public service. We cannot truly fix this broken system until we undo the flawed premise that spending money on elections is the same thing as exercising free speech. That only can be achieved in two ways. The court could overturn Buckley and subsequent decisions based on it, something the current court seems highly unlikely to do, or we amend the Constitution to not only overturn the previous bad court decisions, but also to prevent future ones. Until then, we will fall short of the real reform that is needed. In Federalist number 49, James Madison argued the U.S. Constitution should be amended only on great and extraordinary occasions. I believe we have reached one of those occasions. In today's political campaigns, our free and fair elections, a founding principle of our great democracy, are for sale to the highest bidder. I know amending the Constitution is difficult, and it should be, but we didn't start this effort last year or even in the last Congress. Others before us have urged that this long-standing problem needs a long-term solution. Many of our predecessors understood the corrosive effect money has on our political system. They spent years championing the cause. Senator Fritz Hollings introduced bipartisan constitutional amendments similar to our amendment in every Congress, from the 99th Congress to the 108th Congress. Senators Schumer and Cochran introduced one in the 109th Congress. And those were all before the Citizens United decision, before things went from bad to worse. The out-of-control spending since that decision has further poisoned our elections. But it has also ignited a broad movement to amend the Constitution. I participated in a panel discussion in January with several activists in this movement. One of the panelists, Maryland State Senator Jamie Raskin, was asked about overcoming the difficulty of amending the Constitution. Jamie said, and I quote, "A constitutional amendment always seems impossible until it becomes inevitable. I think we are finally reaching the point of inevitability." Across the country, more than 200 local resolutions have passed calling for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Legislatures in 4 states, Hawaii, Vermont, Rhode Island, and my home state of New Mexico, have all called on Congress to send an amendment to the states for ratification. Many more states have similar resolutions pending. Over 1 million citizens have signed petitions in support of an amendment, and more than 100 organizations under the banner of United for the People are advocating for constitutional remedies. This grassroots movement is yielding progress. In addition to our amendment, several other campaign finance-related amendments have been introduced in the House and the Senate. Senators Leahy and Durbin recently announced that Chairman Durbin's Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution will hold a hearing on the Senate proposals in July. I thank them for their support. The hearing will be a great opportunity to examine the different approaches, to solicit input from constitutional experts, and to have a national discussion about the need to return our elections to the American people. I hope this dialogue will convince some of my Republican colleagues to join me. Fixing our campaign finance system is only a partisan issue in Washington. A recent Washington Post ABC News poll found that nearly 70% of registered voters would like super PACs to be illegal. Among independent voters, that figure rose to 78%. But the court, in its misguided reading of the First Amendment, told the Congress that we can't rein in super PACs. In doing so, it gave millionaires and billionaires unchecked power to influence our elections. It has allowed a flood of PAC money to drown out the voices of average Americans. This is a fatal misreading of the real world of political campaigns, and it is wrong. Supporters of super PACs and unlimited campaign spending claim they are promoting the democratic process. But the public knows better. Wealthy individuals and special interests are buying our elections. Citizens United has really meant citizens denied. Our nation cannot afford a system that says, come on in to the rich and powerful, and says, don't bother to everyone else. The faith of the American people and their electoral system is shaken by big money. It is time to restore that faith. It's time for Congress to take back control. And, Mr. President, just let me say, I know the senator from Rhode Island, as Senator Whitehouse, has worked very hard on this issue, has pulled us together. We're going to have others, I believe, join us in this hour. The crucial thing we're trying to say is we need reform, we need disclose, we need to get to the bottom of what's happening in this broken system and get our democracy back for the American people. So with that, I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President, may I ask that the quorum call be lifted?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. While we are waiting for the next speaker to arrive, I wanted to take a moment and discuss the brief that we filed in the Supreme Court, Senator McCain and I, last week. Let me first ask unanimous consent that a copy of the brief be admitted into the record
without objection.
At the conclusion of our colloquy of remarks here, so that people can refer to it if they're looking at those at the congressional record. The Supreme Court, in the Citizens United decision, was in a difficult situation. No member of the court had ever run for office, run in an election. It may be the first time in the history of the country that no member of the Supreme Court had ever run for office. So it's a Supreme Court that, as a corporate group, was uniquely inexperienced in the actual ins and outs of elections and politics. Moreover, the way that the Citizens United case came up to the court the question that they ended up deciding was one that they asked for additional briefing on. It's a question that, in many respects, the court raised itself. And so it did not have the benefit, the court did not have the benefit of the usual process of a case beginning in the trial court and amassing a record of evidence, of testimony, of witnesses, of a review of all of that at the appellate court level and then final review by the Supreme Court. So they did something very unusual. They actually made a finding of fact. Now, a finding of fact is not something that Supreme Courts are supposed to do in the first instance. That's the job of the trial judge and the jury, if it's a jury trial. Those are the fact finders in our system of law. And certainly a Supreme Court that has an appellate tribunal between it and the trial branch, as our federal system does, it's very unusual for them to be making findings of fact. They made findings of fact in this case. And unfortunately, because they had no experience in elections, any of them, and because they had no record, they made a finding of fact that was not, in fact, a fact. They made a finding of a false fact. And the mistake that they made was to determine that no amount of corporate spending in an election could create either the risk or the appearance of corruption. And I think the practical facts of that are pretty easy to rebut. They stood that finding of fact, that premise, on two subordinate premises, and we rebut both of them in the brief. If I have further time, I will come back to that, but I see that the senator from New Hampshire is here, and I do not wish to cut into her time, so I will yield to the distinguished senator from New Hampshire and appreciate her great work through the long period of discussion and draftsmanship that brought Disclose 2.0 to the floor, now with its 43 co-sponsors. I yield.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased that I could be here today to join you, to join Senator Whitehouse and our colleagues who have been working to try to bring to light for the public the really serious and ongoing problem of excessive campaign spending. And I want to congratulate Senator Whitehouse for all of his work in leading this effort. It's been very important. This excessive spending has really been a problem for the last 2 years since the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United, because their decision has allowed for the formation of what's been called super PACs, which are really organizations that can spend unlimited amounts of money without ever having to disclose where that money came from, so the public doesn't know who's spending the money, doesn't know how that money, the decisions about spending are being made. And now we're actually in the middle of the first presidential election since that Supreme Court decision, and we can really see the dramatic impact of that spending. There are now more than 500 super PACs registered with the Federal Election Commission. They're permitted to raise and spend unlimited amounts of secret money to fund political advertisements. And again, I want to emphasize the fact that we don't know where this money's coming from. We don't know if it's coming from corporations. We've heard a lot of stories, seen a lot of stories that there are very wealthy individuals who are putting up money for these super PACs. But the amount of money that has been spent by these super PACs so far this election cycle alone has just topped $100 million. And nearly $80 million of that came from just 5 groups. So I think as we're looking at this money being spent, it's important for all of us to reflect on our national priorities. What does it say about our country that we allow this kind of deluge of money to flood our electoral process? who's really being represented? Are average voters in America being represented in this process? To provide some perspective, Mr. President, I think it might be useful to examine what else this amount of money could pay for. In the past few weeks, we've been discussing the importance of providing survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault with the resources they need by reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. Well, $100 million, what's already been spent so far in this by these super PACs, that $100 million could fund all of the domestic violence and sexual assault assistance in the entire state of New Hampshire for 20 years. It could serve more than 320,000 victims. The New Hampshire Job Training Program provides workers with valuable instruction at community colleges across our state. It prepares workers for high-skilled jobs and creates a stronger economy. With $100 million, what's been spent by these super PACs, we could train 288,434 workers in New Hampshire. $100 million would provide low-income heating assistance to more than 135,000 households. That's enough to keep New Hampshire's neediest families warm for 3 winters. The starting salary for a police officer in the city of Manchester, our largest city in New Hampshire, is $50,000. With $100 million, we could put an additional 2,000 police officers on the street. But instead, this money is being spent on political advertisements, millions of dollars from groups who refuse to disclose their donors. And most of these expenditures are being made on attack ads. According to a study by the Wesleyan Media Project, at this point during the last presidential campaign in 2008, just 10% of the ads were negative. Now, in this presidential campaign, 70% of those ads are negative. It's no wonder that Americans are becoming increasingly disillusioned with our political process. The challenges confronting this country are significant. We need Americans to be engaged and invested in our political process, not throwing up their hands in frustration as the attack ads pile up. We need campaign finance reform. And I've been pleased to work with presiding officer, with Senator Whitehouse, with all of those of our colleagues in developing the Disclose Act, which makes some important changes to our current system. And Senator Whitehouse described the Disclose Act very well. But it will make sure that voters know who's really paying for all of these campaign ads. It doesn't eliminate super PACs, but it's a very important step in the right direction. I urge all of our colleagues to join us in calling for change, in urging reform of our campaign finance system. I urge everyone in this body to support the Disclose Act. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to ask a question of my colleague from Rhode Island.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I was very engaged by the comments you were making a short period of time ago, Senator Whitehouse, and I was very struck, as I have been all along, about the substantial challenge posed by Citizens United. And you were speaking to the impact on our constitutional system. And when I think about this, I often think about those first 3 words of our Constitution, we the people. Is it your sense that this phrase, we the people, that starts out the Constitution is more than simple window dressing? Does it go to the heart of who and what we are as a society, as a nation?
The great experiment that the founders of this country embarked upon when they founded this country was to allow for a democratic form of government that was governed by the people. Not kings, not lords, not pharaohs, by the people. And it has been a consistent thread through our history, and at important times as the Civil War came to a close and our beloved President Lincoln stood at Gettysburg to give his great address. He talked about the importance of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That has always been the core, heart, and hallmark of the American form of government, and it has lit a blaze, really, that has illuminated the rest of the world as well. It's not just an American value. People from around the world look at this and say, you know, it can be that way.
So I think if any three words were to summarize the heart of our Constitution, it would be those first three words, we the people. And we have a Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, that essentially unleashes a flood of special interest money. Is that fundamentally in conflict with the notion of we the people?
I believe it is. We operate in a modern world in which we are bombarded by media, and the average person, the average ordinary member of the people, does not have much access to that media, cannot get his or her voice much heard in that bombardment. But if you have enormous amounts of money, either because you're a corporation with a vast treasury or because you're a billionaire, you can take a big chunk of that media and you can use it to broadcast your view, and that will drown out other voices that don't have that power. So it really does attack the basic premise of we the people.
So Citizens United goes right against the very heart of our Constitution. How is it possible that the Supreme Court found in this 5-4 decision that this has no corrupting impact on our electoral process?
I think three things went wrong. First of all, this is a Supreme Court that, unlike most, if not all other Supreme Courts, has no political experience. None of them have ever run for office. So they don't have the practical sense of how politics engages in an election. Second, because they sort of invented this question, they didn't have a record where people who did know about politics and did know about elections and did know about corruption could assemble a record that they could then learn from. So they were operating in a much greater vacuum than the Supreme Court usually does. And finally, they made two presumptions that supported it. One was that the super PACs and all these big entities would be independent from the candidates. As we've seen, that was a false assumption. That was a wrong premise. Now the super PACs are connected to a candidate. They have one purpose, to get the candidate elected. They have funds raised by the candidate. They share staff with the candidate. They share consultants with the candidate. They use the same footage as the candidate. The idea that they are independent is really been made preposterous by the facts. And the second was that there would be disclosure. So the public could at least evaluate, okay, this is the coal mining industry coming after somebody who is fighting for climate change. We get that. We can make an appropriate judgment about that use of corporate money to attack a candidate. They're wrong about that as well, and that's why we're here on Disclose 2.0 and why you've worked so hard to make sure that this bill has gotten to the floor in the good shape that it has been.
So our Supreme Court envisioned this steel wall, this high, impenetrable wall between an independent campaign and a candidate's campaign, and thereby saw fit to unleash unlimited money on one side of that wall while saying the other side has campaign caps on it, and that all of that made sense together. But their fundamental premise was wrong.
Absolutely dead wrong, as proven out by reality. It's not a theoretical wrongness. It's a factual wrong. It's an actual wrongness.
Now, most of our campaigns around the country for the U.S. Senate involve millions of dollars. Some are $2 million, some are $20 million, some are more. There are super PACs that have that much money and can bring that much money to bear in a single race. Did the Supreme Court wrestle with the type of intimidation that creates, that pre-censorship impact on this body, when someone is thinking about what should I say, do I want to offend someone who has not just $1 million, but millions and millions of dollars to bring to bear? Did they wrestle with the impact in corrupting the dialogue and the debate and the decision-making of this body?
Not only did they not wrestle with it, Senator, it's not clear that they even thought of it. When you have 9 people who come out of what people have called the judicial monastery, it's not quite the right word because they're men and women alike, but out of the sort of separate province of high-end adjudication, they're not familiar with this. They didn't think of that. And the other thing that they never thought of was that the threat of launching a multi-million-dollar negative attack against a candidate could have a corrupting effect even if no dollars were ever spent. If the threat is successful, if the scheme works, then there's no trail left to it. Before Citizens United, if you wanted to threaten that, your threat was limited to a big PAC contribution, having a fundraiser, things like that. It was not a real threat in the sense that it could knock somebody out of their office. Now the idea that a corporate entity can hide its identity, can launder its identity through 501c4s, and then launch a multi-million-dollar attack in somebody's home state is a credible threat. And that, I think, is a danger, among others, that they overlooked completely.
Well, Mr. President, I thank my colleague from Rhode Island very much for championing this bill and the work he's done to help folks understand this issue. I'll just make a few remarks. My colleague from Vermont is standing by and I think would like to make some remarks as well. I wanted to have the key words that we're talking about put up before us here. This is a picture of the Constitution, or at least the top of the front page, if you will. And I was always struck that our founders saw fit to start this document that lays out the framework for our nation, the framework for our system of governance, with 3 simple words: we the people. They got to it right from the very beginning. They didn't put in 3 paragraphs of polite this and that and then get to the heart of it. They started with the heart, we the people. And they didn't put it in small print. They put it in supersized print. You can see that it's written in a font that's probably 10 times the size of the rest of the Constitution. They deliberately said this is the premise on which our nation will operate. This is the foundation on which we stand. Now, these words are not we the powerful. There's a huge distinction between we the people and we the powerful. But the Supreme Court in Citizens United attacked the very heart of our Constitution by saying that the most powerful companies with vast sums of money can flood our political system, can buy up the airwaves, and completely dominate the conversation. Now, free speech wasn't about one side buying up the airwaves. Of course, airwaves didn't exist then. But wasn't about one side buying up the airwaves and dominating the conversation. It was about all ideas, being able to compete in a marketplace of ideas, so that citizens could hear the pros and cons and decide who they'd like to elect, how they'd like to vote, based on their understanding of what would work best for we the people. But if there was any doubt, now the Supreme Court did not benefit from seeing the Republican primaries of this year in operation. They didn't see how a super PAC would sweep into a state, buy up the airwaves, dominate the conversation, and determine the outcome. No. They had some other vision. And my colleague has referred to the fact that none of the members of the Supreme Court had the political experience to understand the impact of this flood of money. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, how much money can we be talking about? Well, money beyond an amount that a working man or woman could ever envision. If you took it in dollar bills and stacked it in a room in your house, it would fill the room in your house plus. You couldn't get all those dollar bills into a room. We are talking about such an enormous amount of money that it completely controls the sound and the airwaves. Let me give you an example. In 2008, if one of the rather well-off companies in America, and I'm going to use them as an example, they made a lot of money that year, the Exxon Corporation, if they had spent just 3%, $3 out of 100 of their net profits on the presidential race, they would have spent as much as the rest of America put together. That's the type of flood we're talking about, washing across the cities and the countrysides of America, buying up the newspapers, buying up the airwaves, and dominating the debate. That is not a competition of ideas envisioned in our Constitution. That is we the powerful. That is not we the people. Now, it is my hope that the members of the Supreme Court will stand back and realize that their finding of facts was wrong. Their finding of fact that there was no corruption from this flood of money was wrong. Their argument that it didn't attack the heart of the Constitution was wrong. The fact that they didn't consider the pre-censorship that this type of flood of money creates was in error, and that they'll change their decision. But we can't be sure that this activist right-wing court will consider the facts and reach a finding consistent with the Constitution, the very heart of our Constitution. We can't be sure of that. So we have to do what we can in this chamber, and that's the Disclose Act. The Disclose Act that says at least, at a minimum, this huge flood of money will be identified by the donor, and it will be identified promptly so that citizens will be able to find out where it came from. And that the advertisements that are purchased by this money will have disclaimers that will say who the major contributors are, so citizens can see it in real time. So that when that group says that we are the group America for Green Forests and Blue Skies, and it's really by a very powerful group that is against blue skies and against green forests, you can find out who it is. That's the heart of this. Citizens United is a dagger poised at the heart of the American Constitution. We must reverse it, and we must use every tool at our disposal to make that happen. I encourage citizens, summon your full instincts about what we value in our democracy and make your voices heard. Let's get this Disclose Act passed, and let's go further to reverse Citizens United. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I yield the floor to my colleague.
Senator from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Whitehouse and Senator Merkley and everybody else for the very hard work they've done on this monumentally important issue. It's hard for me to think of an issue that is more important. Senator Merkley a moment ago used the word pre-censorship, which is an interesting concept, and I want to give you an example of this. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent to submit into the record an article that appeared in the American Banker fairly recently.
Without objection.
And let me read you what this article says. There is a member of the banking industry who contrasts what the old rules would have allowed, and that is, under the old rules, there are limits to how much people can contribute into a PAC, and that is $5,000 before the primary, $5,000 after, a total of $10,000. And what this gentleman, Mr. Packard, says from the banking industry, says, if someone says, I'm going to give your opponent $5,000 or $10,000, you might say, yeah, okay. But if you say the bankers are going to put in $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million into your opponent's campaign, that starts to draw some attention. End of quote. What that gentleman is saying, and what this whole issue is about, is that if a member of Congress is prepared to stand up to Wall Street, you better watch out. If you're going to vote for a bill that protects consumers, you better watch out because, as this banker just said, there may be $500,000 or $1 million going to your opponent, going into television and radio ads. So when members of the House and the Senate are thinking about how they want to address the recklessness and irresponsibility on Wall Street, if they are thinking, as I am thinking, about the need to break up these huge banks which have so much power and have done so much harm to our country, if you want to bring about reform of the Fed so you don't have representatives of the largest banks in America sitting on regional feds, you know what? You're going to think twice about going forward, because you're going to worry that when you go home on the weekend, there are going to be all kinds of ads, unlimited amounts of ads from the banking industry. Or maybe you're concerned as to why in America we spend almost twice as much per person on health care as any other nation. Maybe you want to move, as I do, to a single-payer health care system. Well, the private insurance companies are not going to like that. They're going to pour huge amounts of money into advertising. Or maybe you're concerned that in America we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Are you going to really take on the pharmaceutical industry if they now have the ability to spend unlimited sums of money? So, Mr. President, I come to the floor this afternoon to express my profound disgust with the current state of our campaign finance system and to call for more disclosure until we can finally overturn Citizens United. And I know the presiding officer from New Mexico has a very good constitutional amendment to do just that. I have one. There are other good amendments. Long-term, no question in my mind, we need to overturn Citizens United. In my view, it will go down in history as one of the worst decisions ever to come from the Supreme Court by a 5-4 decision. 5 members of the Court came to the bizarre conclusion that corporations should be treated as if they were people and that they have a First Amendment right to spend as much money as they want in elections, even though corporations can't vote. So the average American, with pride, on Election Day goes out and votes, studies the issues, votes for the candidate of his or her choice. There are many people in this country who make campaign contributions. Maybe they'll contribute $25. Maybe they'll contribute $50. Maybe if they have a lot of money, they may contribute $1,000 or $2,000. But what Citizens United is saying is that a small number of people who run large multinational corporations can spend as much as they want on campaigns. And if that is what American democracy is supposed to be about, you surely could have fooled me, and I think many Americans who put their lives on the line to defend American democracy. What American democracy is, one person, one vote. We're all in this together. You may be rich and you may be poor, but under our Constitution, you have one vote. And this country has had to go through a very rocky process to ensure one person, one vote. In the beginning, poor whites couldn't vote. Women couldn't vote. African Americans couldn't vote. And we struggled and we struggled and we struggled and we said, in America, every citizen of this country is going to have their say on Election Day. That's what we learned when we were in elementary school. That's what democracy is about. And by a 5-4 Supreme Court vote, the Supreme Court said, hey, yeah, everybody has one vote, but if you're rich, if you're the head of a corporation, you can go into corporate treasuries and spend as much money as you want. The average Joe, one vote. Corporate America can spend unlimited sums of money buying the airwaves. And we're seeing this today. This is no academic, intellectual debate. People all over America are seeing the results of Citizens United today on their television stations and on their radio stations. In the past few months, the American people have seen what Citizens United means. Super PACs alone have spent over $112 million on this election, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, and we're still more than 5 months away from Election Day. And if 2 weeks before the election you got a billionaire out there head of some corporation, who was to say that person cannot take hundreds of millions of dollars out of a large corporation and spend it on an election? Totally legal, but not what America is supposed to be about. Now, Mr. President, I know you are aware of it, once again, because of your excellent constitutional amendment. What we are seeing throughout grassroots America is that people are beginning to stand up and they're saying, no, we don't want Citizens United. We want to overturn it. We want real democracy in this country. And I'm very proud that in the state of Vermont and in 4 other states, state legislatures now have gone on record saying overturn Citizens United. 209 cities have passed resolutions to that effect, including some 50 or 60 in the state of Vermont, and people are organizing all over America on this issue. And I want to thank Senator Whitehouse and others for the work they're doing on this disclosed bill. This is the very least that we can do, the very least that we can do, and I'm eagerly awaiting to hear the arguments from those people who oppose it. If I put an ad on as a candidate, if you put an ad on as a candidate, Senator Whitehouse puts an ad on television as a candidate, we have to say, as we should, I approve this ad. If you're saying something nasty, you're saying something dishonest, the viewers have the right to know that you are behind that ad. You're not hiding. But right now, ads going on all over this country. Who's paying for them? We don't know who's paying for them. We don't see that pretty face on the TV saying, I am the CEO of this corporation, I approve this ad. We don't get the immediate disclosure that we should as to who is paying for that ad, and that's all that this disclosed legislation does. So long-term, no question, we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. It would be awfully nice if maybe our friends on the Supreme Court realized the error of their ways and acted accordingly. But at the very least, here in the Congress, we need to pass a disclosed piece of legislation and minimize the severe damage that Citizens United is doing to our democracy. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President? Mr. President, it's my understanding I'm to be recognized at 2, and we are about 2:01.